Now let's look at businesses. When we know that many Korean businesses were targeted. Now, if a person privately owns a business, I mean, like, aren't they rich? Like, aren't they rich if they privately own a business? That's what many people think.
Well, I want to first share the story of my husband's family, right? So, at one point in Korea, their family was one of three businesses that introduced gum, chewing gum in South Korea, right? And I heard that the other two, one was Lotte, and there was, I don't know, was it Hete? Anyway, huge, like global conglomerates, right? But for his family, it just didn't work out. And so, they came to the United States, and because of language barriers and other things of that nature, my father-in-law ended up becoming a janitor for American Airlines. Maybe it was a, contracting job, but in essence. And, they're barely eking out a living. And it was only when my father-in-law had referred a client to an immigration attorney that he received, I believe it was $20,000 as like a referral fee, right? And basically that was his seed money to go buy a business. Obviously 20,000 could only carry you so far, right? Even back then. But basically he did two other things, which was he was able to find a Korean bank who would give him a loan. And studies have shown that Koreans and Asians also face the same kind of discrimination from financial institutions, right? And so that's why Korean banks came to be, because Koreans could not get loans from anyone else. So the Korean community ultimately set up their own banks. And studies show that there are more Asian-owned businesses when there's presence of Asian-owned banks. But anyway, so my father-in-law was able to get a loan from a Korean bank, but also the seller, the business owner, carried the loan for part of it. And so obviously, if you think about a 20,000, he was highly leveraged. And so, you know, yeah, he was definitely over leveraged or highly leveraged. And when he went in, he had to work very long hours. Basically, if you think about a business, especially like a liquor store or convenience store, they open from like 7 a.m. to like 2 a.m. in the morning. And I think I've shared with you, but I asked my husband, who used to be a business broker, but also ran these stores, how much do these stores make? And I was literally shocked. They make around 3 to 5, typical, liquor store or convenience store, they net about 3 to 5 thousand after expenses, but before payroll. And if you think about 7 a.m. to 2 a.m., you really need two shifts. You need someone at the cashier. You also need someone, helping with stocking. That's 4 employees. But with 3 to 5 thousand before payroll, how do you make that work? It's really not sustainable. The only way that you could make it work is one person working two shifts and using family labor. And so that's what happened with my father-in-law. And because of the long hours, for the first 3 years, Monday through Friday, he didn't come home. The business that he bought, there was a house attached to it, not a huge fancy house. So he would literally not come home, sleep at the house attached to the store. And then on Fridays after school, my husband would go and replace his father. And so my husband, for the 3 years, he basically on weekends was basically enslaved into that store and slept there. So that's kind of the reality for many of these business owners, that their margins I don't even want to call it margins. It's like they're basically working, and my husband did the calculation. It was less than minimum wage after they counted for the number of hours that they had to work. And so maybe it may appear that they are a business owner, but the reality of what they are actually being paid, especially in a very dangerous job that is traumatizing, is really, they're not rich at all.
So even though Korean Americans in the early 1990s may own businesses, you're saying that they were highly leveraged. It's probably the bank that owned most of the business, if you think about it, and they were able to run it because family was working,
Mhm.
and family was oftentimes not paid. You're talking about your husband, and how old was he when he was running the
You know
shop with
what?
his father?
He had just, he did start school like a 1 year after the fact. They sometimes when you come to America, they kind of put you back. So after eighth grade, his dad surprised him with a new car. It was an Oldsmobile, which was not his favorite style, but basically the car was not to say, hey, go have fun or drive to school, but it was so that he could drive to work, for the father's business so that he could help him. So starting in ninth grade, pretty much, as I said, he literally lived in that store. And I met him when he was just finishing college, and he was still, running and helping to run his dad's store as well.
Wow. So his father is working the first shift, and then he's just like a freshman in high school, and he's going to school, but then he's also I guess after he gets out of school, he goes straight to the
Right,
store and
on Friday.
works.
So literally on weekends, he lived at the store, right? Yeah.
All right. So now, would you say that these Asian store owners that they made a lot of money and profit off of the community, which was already depressed economically?
Well, as I said before, they're literally netting 3 to 5 thousand, and when you take into consideration payroll, they're making less than minimum wage. And if I was to put a different framework, they're really providing a service, um, with putting their life on the line when so many others are not willing to provide that service in the community. And so again, I think the narrative that has been disseminated, has really been, I think, hurtful for both communities. And I think that, um, you know, part of the my motivation in telling a fuller, more accurate story is because, when you don't have clarity and accuracy of assessment of the situation, you're going to come up with wrong solutions because you haven't made a correct assessment. And I think I might have shared in the past, but if you need someone to jump and they refuse, you're not going to be happy with them. But if you learn that they're in a wheelchair, well, your feelings will shift a little bit, right? um, but more importantly, you're gonna stop yelling at them because it's futile to yell at someone in a wheelchair to jump. But it still doesn't take away now your need for them to jump. But knowing again that they're now in a wheelchair, you're going to come up with better solutions, right? You're not going to be just yelling at someone who just cannot do it. And unfortunately, I would say for many of these store owners, because of the perception that they are wealthy, they are rich, and that they're profiteering on the backs of the Black community or other communities, gives this perception of that, they owe something to the local community. And I think the understanding or the recognition of the truth of the reality of these store owners, that they're literally, again, putting their life on the line, eking out like literally less than minimum wage to provide a service. I think, it will open eyes and open hearts, but also come with better solutions, right? Yelling at someone to hire locally, right? Or yelling at someone to provide better service when someone's just been traumatized, being held up at gunpoint, right? And literally no vacation, no holidays, working 16-hour day. Again, it doesn't excuse them, but recognizing the reality, you're going to come up with some better solutions. And I think that I've given an example of, we run a program where we have a job training program. The pay comes from the government. We, as a job placement site, provide the training, and the individual gets job training and gets pay, right? And so if that could be a potential solution where a job placement program was placed in these stores, well, the store owner will get some extra help and a little break, and the individual will get some job training and get paid. It's a win for the community because you know what? They'll get better service, and someone who's unemployed that may cause problem now is employed, also paying taxes, right? So it's also a safer neighborhood. And you know what? I think for the store owner, they might even get a great ambassador, because once someone is on the store owner side and see the reality that they face, they could be a wonderful bridge as well. So again, it creates a win-win situation.
Thank you so much, Ethan, for sharing such a personal story. Your husband, your father-in-law, and a little bit of their story, and kind of breaking down the stereotype of the model minority, which is often given to Asian Americans, that why can't you be more like this group, right? And what that does is it creates a wedge between other groups.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, some of that tension, which is going to lead to the flashpoint, as we know. But if we know the story, as you mentioned, then perhaps we could have a better solution, like what you mentioned and what your organization is doing as well.